So I'm going live now.
Right. Let me check on my mobile whether the live is on coming.
Yeah. It's there. It's coming.
Coming. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so welcome to this last session of this first module. Stephen, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thanks. So I'm going to highlight myself. Spotlight for everybody. Okay. So welcome to this last session, and pardon my books, which are all in a mess as usual. So during our session today, we're going to talk a little bit about youth. I don't have very much experience with youth. The little experience that I have, we'll talk from there. We'll pull out some of the research. So a little bit about me before that, since I have been kind of the host of all these, the last 10 meetings. I'm Dinesh Braganza, originally from Pune, but joined the Jesuits in Gujarat, did my studies in counseling, and now I'm back here in Jnana, staying in Papal Seminary, doing some teaching, some research, and part of this laity formation team. So today we are going to look at youth. Now, in the kind of write-up I had put up on the YouTube thumbnail, I had mentioned that youth are the future of the church. The future, yes, and as Pope Francis reminds us, they are also the present, very much the present. So with that in mind, I'm going to share a PowerPoint, and then we shall get started with that. So journeying with youth. A little while ago, we had done a study in the context of the Pope's call for synodality and entering into the synodal process. And the whole process of synodality is about talking, about listening, about expressing one's views. And this is where we are really interested. The Pope's New Year message on the World Day of Peace stresses this fact of the importance of intergenerational dialogue. He said we need the youth because they are the ones who bring something new. We also need the older ones because they are grounded in tradition. And so there is this intergenerational dialogue, which is very, very important. So it's always good to listen to people. So a couple of months ago, we had done a small pilot study to see, in the context of this, the Pope's call for synodality, what are the issues that seem important for people? And concern about youth was the topmost issue. So we had some quantitative questions, which are kind of closed responses. And we had some open questions. And we asked people, what are the real issues of concern in the church? And right at the top was youth. So as you see this, the one in the yellow, the bright yellow, these are the top concerns that our respondents mentioned. Youth and concerns about youth, about faith, about women, about laity, about education and the poor. These were kind of the top themes. But as you see, a whole lot of other areas also came up. Now, one thing to note, we had about close to 200 people in this pilot study. There were no youth in this survey. So what is being said and the concern about youth is more from older people. And they are concerned about youth. Where are the youth going? I'm going to take this first slide, however, not looking at youth, but looking at the call to faith that came up in our study. The emphasis was, say, on the lack of faith among younger generations, a call to re-evangelize religious and lay, the importance of faith formation, not just for children, but for adults. There's pretty strong mention on the fragility of the church leadership and the fact that faith activities are limited to sacraments. We had a symposium a few days back on synodality, and there one of the speakers, Rena, had mentioned about sacramental gas stations. My tank is empty, I go there for mass or go for confession or go for some sacraments, top up my tank, and then I go ahead in life. But it's not a place of really growing. There's this emphasis also that the church needs to kind of live what we are saying. We need to help the poor, share the wealth of the church with the needy. Priests and religious especially need to live simpler lives. Christians, the life of Christians needs to be more edifying. And this cannot happen unless faith life deepens. Once again, the emphasis on children and youth, building and sustaining the faith among our children. And priests are to be trained in poverty, chastity, and humbleness. Greed for money in women spoils the church faith. We've seen the scandals coming up, and this kind of just reinforces this, the importance of dealing with this. When it came to youth, what did the respondents say about youth? One, very clearly, they said, we need them to be in places that are important. Given the situation in the country, they need to be in government positions, police, IAS, foreign service, public service. Youth need to be involved in various activities. Guidance centers for youth are needed, developing job opportunities. What about this concern about jobless youth? There's also this worry about youth are not interested in church activities. We need to involve and encourage the youth to participate in church activities, give them training and incentives to become leaders of the church. Question about formation of youth and making strong youth groups. So these are kind of the older people saying, this is what we need for our youth. The problem was, like I said already, there were no youth who were part of this pilot survey. So we really do not know what they have to say. We will listen to voices of youth from a pan-India survey that we had done a few years ago, just when the Pope had announced the Synod on Youth. And we will look at some of the things that youth have said from that survey, because I think that is still valid. The world has not changed that much. And the concerns about the church, I think, are being repeated by many other people, and you will recognize that as we look at it today. But before we come to that, there's a dangerous question I want to ask you. I want to ask all of us, perhaps. Okay? A dangerous question. So the question is this: would you knowingly do something that would harm another person just because some authority told you to do it? What do you think? Would any of us do something that is really going to harm somebody just because someone has told us to do it, some authority has told us to do it? What do you think? Would you deliberately harm somebody? So I'm not going to put any of us on the spot here, but I'm going to go to some of the research that was done in the 60s and 70s. There was this guy, Stanley Milgram, who had done studies. And one of the studies he did was, he said, we want to check how much pain people can tolerate. So he called for research volunteers, and he told them, what you have to do is you have to give a shock to another person, or another volunteer, when they do something wrong. So they're learning something, and they have to, if they get it wrong, what you have to do is you have to give them a shock. And they had the supervisors there, guiding this process. And so the experiment, the study carried on, and as these people were making mistakes, the volunteers were giving them shocks, and then the supervisor would say, yeah, increase the voltage and give them a bigger shock. Now, the results of this study literally shocked everybody, because Stanley Milgram and his co-researchers never expected to find what they did find. They found that people gave shocks and continued to give shocks to people, even to the level that would have killed the other person. Now, Stanley Milgram, was the real purpose of his study was not to check how much pain people can tolerate, but to check whether people will do something that they know is going to harm somebody just because they have been told to do it by some authority. So the results, like I said, flabbergasted all the researchers. They never expected to find this, that people would deliberately do things that are wrong, harmful to others, because they have been told by authorities. There was a big uproar about this. They said, you can't do this, it is unethical, you are deceiving everybody. The experiments were repeated with the ethical concerns taken care of, and they found exactly the same results. Now, I'm going to ask you a funny question. There were religious people, there were atheists, all in that group. Who do you think would be less likely? Who do you think would be less likely to cause harm? Religious or atheists? Who do you think? Would religious be less likely to cause harm, or would atheists be less likely to cause harm? Yeah. So Vasanti has said atheists were less likely, and it's true. So atheists were less likely to do these shocks, give this. So this started a whole lot of research on external versus internal religiosity. And we found that people who have an external religiosity, very obedient to scripture, very obedient to religious authority, they were the ones who were most likely to inflict harm on others when they were given that injunction by some authority. And we see this being repeated across our country right now, but across the world also. So we have religious fundamentalists who just follow blindly whatever their leaders tell them. Okay. And so this is something that needs to concern us. Why do I say it needs to concern us? Because we have been very much brought up with this thing that we have to be obedient to the church. We must not question. Earlier, we had the index. The church had an index of books that should not be read. And we have learned not to question. And questioning, I think, is really, really, really important. And that brings us to the question of identity. And we will explore that, because who are we really? Where do we get our sense of identity from? So there's this guy called James Marcia. One of the the great well-known people when we look at human development and we look at how we develop, one of the great persons is Erik Erikson, and he has kind of mapped out the whole lifespan of development and how we grow in all the different areas of life. But the teenage years are a kind of very special time. This is the time when identity is consolidated or not. And this researcher, James Marcia, proposed this category of identity statuses. So there are 4 of these. There is foreclosure, identity diffusion, moratorium, and identity achievement. So foreclosure, we all hear about this identity crisis. We're going through an identity crisis. We're not sure who we are. So people who are in foreclosure, they decide their identity very early. They decide who they are going to be based not on going through a struggle, but they base their decision on what other people tell them, on parents or religious leaders or something from scripture they get, or they go for a retreat and they say, okay, I should do this and become this. And they decide their identity too early. And this identity that they have decided is based not on an inner quest and search and coming to a sense of who they are, but on external factors. Now, the people who foreclose their identity, they are the most likely, in the Milgram obedience experiments, they were the most likely to inflict harm on others. So when people have an identity that is based on some external reality, scripture or religious teachings or religious authorities or some community leaders and authorities or role models, these are people whose, when there are difficult questions, they will take on the role that has been given them from outside. I think this is of special concern in the church, because in the church, most people who choose to become priests choose to become priests very, very early in their teens. Often you'll find people joining religious life soon after the 10th standard or 12th standard, when they haven't the faintest idea of what life is all about. And so these people then become leaders in the church, but their identity is from outside. They have not gone through the struggle. So therefore, for us, as people who are accompanying young people, very important to not give answers to youth. Very important to not allow them to go through their own struggle. Young people need to go through their own struggle. They need to find their answers inside. They have to wrestle with the problems that life is bringing and dealing with it. Very, very important. Otherwise, much of the clericalism in the church, I think, comes from people who are foreclosed in their identity. They do not know who they are outside this function of being a clergy person. We see this happening when people who are foreclosed get into positions of authority. Principals, superiors, parish priests, bishops, cardinals, they become very authoritarian. In fact, those who are in foreclosure are the most likely to be authoritarian. And we see this happening in our church. a real big problem. People in foreclosure, when they are young, they don't ask questions. They just passively take in what other people are telling them. So that is a real challenge for us. We see this foreclosure all around the world because going through the struggle and finding out answers for oneself is not an easy task. We have to face a lot of darkness inside and outside before we come to a sense of who we are. The second identity status is identity diffusion, which is again another problem today. Today, there is so many possible choices that young people get lost. We just don't know who we are. Should I be this or this or this or this or this or this? They have no way of finding out. And so we have people who just remain with this sense of not knowing who they are. They're kind of lost. And sometimes you see these people behaving like teenagers in their 40s, 50s, 60s, no sense of who they are, no idea of who they are. What is our job at this time? Accompaniment is extremely important. We need to journey with people, find out, help them to find out what it is that they want, help them to talk about their struggles, talk about what is important for them, talk about what is the confusion, help them to sort out the strands of confusion in their lives. Extremely important that people who are journeying with youth, all of us will be journeying with youth at some time or the other in our lives. So helping people navigate this is very important, because otherwise we just lose our youth. There are also those who are kind of forced by their parents. You must do this or you must do that. You must get married or you must join or you must something or the other. So there are some external forces forcing them to make a decision, and they kind of get a feeling, I'm not ready right now. I'm not ready. I need a timeout. I need a timeout. So they take that timeout. Sometimes this timeout can be doing volunteer work. Sometimes this timeout can be doing some studies. Sometimes this timeout is taken by travel. Sometimes this timeout by taking a temporary job while they sort out what they want in life. Moratorium can be linked to like a basketball game going on really well, and this one team is winning and going way ahead. The other team has kind of lost its momentum. So they say, we need a timeout to get back, get their breath, regroup, get a sense of what they're going to do, replan, and then move ahead. So moratorium is a temporary kind of phase most of the time. And then identity achievement. Identity achievement, people go through the struggle. They find out for themselves what they want. It is not an easy task. They really wrestle with life. They wrestle with what it means to be a human being. They wrestle with what it would mean to be Indian. They wrestle with what it means to be Christian, Catholic, whatever. They wrestle with what it means to be a boy or a girl. And they slowly come to a sense of who they are, really, from inside. So these are the 4 identity statuses. Identity achievement. Research shows that identity achievement is linked with higher levels of ethical behavior, higher ability to show compassion to others, higher ability to deal with change and handle stress. There is an internal motivation. They have what we call in psychology an internal locus of control. They have a sense that they are in charge of their lives. The most ethical group. They are willing, like Jesus, to sacrifice themselves for others. Those in foreclosure are more likely to sacrifice others for themselves. Now, to give you a stark contrast of how this is seen, if we look at Jesus and we look at the Pharisees, we see the Pharisees were probably in foreclosure. They got their sense of identity from scripture, from tradition. So they did everything according to that. On the other hand, you have Jesus, who has gone through this whole struggle and has stepped out of the rat race. He has come to a sense of who he is. And therefore, he behaves very ethically. He can deal comfortably with tax collectors, with sinners, with all kinds of people. And Jesus says, you have heard said in the law that it was done this way, but I say to you. People who have come to identity achievement will use this kind of language. They have their authority from inside themselves. Now, the tragedy is most leaders in the church will just toe the party line. It was so edifying to me the other day when we were having our symposium to see the non-clerical presenters, the non-clergy presenters being so outspoken, committed. You could feel the fire in what they were saying. Not so much in the others. Not so much. Because I think the people who were the non-clergy presenters have gone through a struggle. What does it mean to be Catholic? What does it mean to be woman? What does it mean to be in a church that looks down on people? And therefore they could speak. There was power in what they said. Our youth, we have to journey with them, helping them to come to a sense of who they are. Not telling them who they are, but listening to them on their journey, feeding back to them what we hear them say, helping them to articulate their confusions and struggles. Otherwise, we will just end up in foreclosure, or they will just get lost, and we will not have people who are really ethical. When we look at the data from our survey, I will come back to this because it gives us some good insights on what people are saying and doing. Now, I thought it would be good to have a few developmental perspectives from psychology, spirituality. Development moves in stages. We know this. Babies learn to move their bodies, then they learn to crawl, then they learn to take step by step, then they learn to walk, then they learn to run. Similar to that, we have growth happening in all the different areas of life. So individuals grow from a sense of egocentric. I am the center of the world. Then my family becomes the center of the world. Then my community becomes the center of the world. Often we get stuck there. My community, my religion, my ethnic group, that becomes the center of the world. Often we get stuck there. But we are all called to grow into world-centric people, cosmocentric people. And we have examples of this in the world today. Desmond Tutu, who passed away a few days ago, was one of those. We see the Dalai Lama. We see Pope Francis. These are people who can hold the entire world in their heart. Okay, and we are all called to become like this. And it's a journey. We also have Maslow, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he tells us we grow through this process. We have physical needs, and those physical needs have to be satisfied. If physiological needs are not satisfied, especially in the early years, brain development gets stunted, intellectual development falters. Once all of that is done, safety needs are extremely important. And I emphasize this because safety is not just physical safety. It is emotional safety. It is spiritual safety. So a church which threatens people that if you don't do this, you are going to hell, does not provide that sense of safety. I'm going to repeat this because I think it is really important. A church and a church leadership and a clergy that cannot provide a sense of emotional and spiritual safety, in a way, destroys a sense of safety for people. Then there is a sense of belonging and esteem, and ultimately, people growing to the fullness of who they can be. This is what Maslow talks about. As we look at development, we see that people grow from a sense of being self-centered to other-centered. Don't look at many of the leaders of our country or many of world leaders, because even though they are chronologically adults, many are still stuck self-centered. It's all about them. And that is a sickness. We also grow from a sense of initially on external authority. Why are you doing this? Oh, mommy told me to do this. I remember my mother saying, why, when she was telling me to do something, and I said, yeah, but why should I do it? Because I'm telling you to do it. Okay. It worked for a while when I was a young boy, but then it doesn't last very long. So then we have to find our own answers. So then we have to grow from a reliance on external authority to inner values. And here we see this guy, Lawrence Kohlberg. Lawrence Kohlberg was a researcher who studied moral development. And he divided moral development into three main kind of areas: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. In the first, each of them has two levels or two stages. In the first stage, the focus is on obedience and punishment. What is punished is wrong. What is punished is wrong. So therefore, I stay away from anything that gets punished, because what is punished means it's wrong. How do I know it is wrong? I got punished. The second one goes a little further. It builds on that and says, okay, what is rewarded is right. I will do something for you if you do something for me. Okay. It's kind of like a joke, but it has a lot of wisdom in it. A few years ago, Donald Trump was running for elections in the United States. And there is this guy, Deepak Chopra, very well-known person. He's a doctor. He's done a lot of work in spirituality. So Deepak Chopra says, Donald Trump has the morality of a 3-year-old. Donald Trump has the morality of a 3-year-old. What did he mean? For a 3-year-old, what is wrong is what is punished. If I am not punished, I can do anything. And I don't get a sense of it being wrong. When we look in India, what is happening? All kinds of things are happening, and people don't have a sense of them being right or wrong. They have not developed that sense of ethical sense. So cow lynching, murder, robbing, rape, all of these are indicators that the people are at really low moral development levels. They have just not grown up. Many of us have just not grown up. Many of us in the church, including in leadership positions, are still stuck at this level of reward and punishment. Then we come to the level of conventional morality, where it is about fitting in. Now, normally we find this in school age, college age individuals, where the important thing is fitting in with my peer group. And that is important. And therefore, for instance, if somebody does something wrong and you ask the group who did that wrong thing, nobody will let it out the secret, because that loyalty to the group is the highest ethical behavior at that level. So what is moral is loyalty to the group. If you are disloyal to the group, you are being immoral. Now, many of us, even religious congregations, are stuck at this level. Where loyalty to the group, loyalty to the congregation, loyalty to the church becomes the ultimate value. We then grow further into the sense of law and order. And therefore, we have to go according to rules and regulations. And many in the church are stuck at this level. And therefore, canon law is used to beat people up. Or you have to you cannot have meat on certain days. You have to fast, so etc. All those kinds of things. The pandemic has come along and shaken up and loosened up a lot of these rules and regulations by which we normally used to live. But we are called to grow further. We are called to grow to a sense of human rights, to a sense of the sense of the sacredness of all creation, to grow to a morality of a Nelson Mandela, of a Gandhi, of a Jesus, of a Buddha. That is where we are called. Most of us are stuck either in the pre-conventional or the conventional levels of morality. When we look at our faith development is kind of almost parallel to our moral development. Initially, we have a faith which we just soak up from our families. There is a sense of the faith life of our families, the prayers, the hymns, the altar in front of which we pray, or being carried to church, going with our families, and we just soak up this. So everything that is happening around us, we just soak it up. Then we grow to the mythic, literal faith. Here, for instance, the Bible, everything is taken literally. So if God created the world in 7 days, yes, it took exactly 7 days. 6 days, and on the 7th day, God rested. Yes, if we talk about the miracles being performed, they are taken literally. Everything is taken literally. Many of us remain here at this level. We read the Bible with a literal eye. Everything is taken literally. We talk about gospel truth, correct? Everything is taken literally. The meaning, there are metaphors, there are myths which are have a deeper meaning, and that is something that we have to grow into. Some of us, even as adults, remain at the mythic literal stage, which is generally what we would find among children. But some of us remain that way even as adults. Synthetic conventional faith is similar to kind of being like a teenager. We move from the stories to being part of the group. So God is a friend, God is a father, God is a guide. And what is really important is belonging to this group. Therefore, one of the worst punishments is excommunication, being out of this group. Now, as we go through this sense of growing in our faith, We will find certain difficulties in the church. We will find certain difficulties in the religion. But we suppress those doubts, those questions, because what is more important is belonging to the group. Conventional faith. Everybody goes for Mass on Sunday, so I also go for Mass on Sunday. Everybody says the rosary, so I say the rosary. Everybody goes for confession, so I go for confession. That way. We can remain stuck at this level. And many of us do remain stuck at this level. Some will begin to question. So why am I a Christian? Why should I go for Mass on Sunday? Why? And therefore we start developing our own spiritual beliefs. We grow into a sense, we start owning our faith. Then we can say, you may believe that, but this is what I have come to believe from my own deep experience. Over here, there is really a development of a relationship being developed with God. And therefore, even if others do not walk the path, I will choose to walk the path because I have grown into this level of faith. That is not the end of the journey. Some, for instance, people like Thomas Merton, begin to realize that God is far bigger than the church. God is far bigger than religion. God is far bigger than all our rational answers and understandings. And so we start growing beyond that, beyond reason, beginning to trust that we are part of this mystery of the divine. There is a sense of the sacredness of everything. There's a sense of how God is at work in all religions and beyond all religions. So conjunctive faith, start recognizing the beauty, the mystery that is there in every faith tradition, in science, in music, in poetry, in literature. We start seeing and experiencing the reality of this everywhere. In universalizing faith, starts going beyond that. These are the real mystics, people who have moved beyond the boundaries of religion. People like Teilhard de Chardin, people like Pope Francis, I think, is definitely part of this. People who have grown beyond. You can think of Gandhi over here. We can think of many of the mystics, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, who have grown really beyond the boundaries of religion. So these are some of the theories that we have looked at and that can give us a sense of where we are, where our youth are, and where we're getting stuck. Now, a few years ago, like I said, we did this study. But before I come to the study, we had done another study I think a year or so ago, and we had asked people the question of, what is your religious orientation? Okay. Do you consider yourself spiritual and religious? Now, religion and spirituality are kind of being differentiated as psychological variables. So do you consider yourself religious and spiritual, or religious but not spiritual, or spiritual but not religious? Or are you neither spiritual nor religious? Very interestingly, quite a big chunk of people, close to 20% of the respondents from all the different age groups said that they were spiritual but not religious. Now, this is kind of mirroring what is happening in the US. In the US, there have been the Pew Research group was doing their studies, and one of the questions they used to ask was what religion people belong to. And then they began to find that they started finding a category where people say none of the above. And so this group started being called the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, nuns. This is a group of people who are don't claim any affiliation to organized religion. But these people also have a very deep interest in spirituality. And that is really interesting. So in our recent, at present, millennials, about 40% of millennials claim to be none, have no religious affiliation. This is going to come here in India as well. We see the signs of this when we looked at the pilot study we did, because there we found that people are kind of getting upset about, oh my gosh, these youth are losing their faith. They're not coming to the church. We have to get them involved in the church. Youth are finding their own way. They are telling us that religion, the way it was, is not making sense to them. And therefore, they are changing. They are finding their way. And if we have to have this intergenerational dialogue that Pope Francis is talking about, well, you have to listen to what they are saying. It is going to challenge us. There's going to be a lot of anxiety on our behalf, on our sides, because we don't know the answers. We are entering into uncharted territory, and youth, the church, has to find its own way. The church for very long has been attempting to drive into the future by going according to tradition. And that works for a while, but it doesn't work very well. We have to learn to read the signs of the time, learn to read the signs of what is happening with youth, learn to read the signs of what is happening with ourselves in order to. So I'm going to talk about very quickly about this research that we did, finding youth in India and their direction in life. So the focus of the research was on how youth perceive themselves, the church, relationships, social awareness, etc. We had about 5,000, over 5,000, about 5,500 youth across the country. Almost equal numbers of male and female, mostly unmarried, mostly Catholic, from the age group of 16 to 25 was the biggest group, was the biggest chunk, 89%. Mostly college going and mostly full-time students. So these are our youth, basically. So we looked at the purpose in life scale. Now the purpose in life scale, if you remember what I told you about identity achievement, people who have achieved their identity have a very clear purpose in life. Now keep that in mind as we look at some of the ratings, some of the responses. So over here, we had the purpose in life scores. Okay, we divided them into low, average, and high. And over here, we see that 38% of our respondents had low purpose in life. So maybe they don't have the questions, maybe their questions are not being, there is no proper atmosphere for them to go through this struggle. But a big chunk of people have low scores in purpose in life. The purpose in life scores improve with education, but even at the postgraduate level, a big chunk of people still have low scores in purpose in life. When we look at those who are unemployed, you see that almost half of them here, almost half of them have low purpose in life. So therefore, just giving answers from out does not work. We have to journey with our youth, helping them to make sense of life. Interestingly, generally, we find that as people grow, they have more experience of life. They grow to a sense of what is important for them and then come to that. But a big chunk of people, even above 25 years of age, don't really know what they want in life. That could be an indicator of identity diffusion. So we found that we did some analysis, statistical analysis, and we found that what are some of the predictors of purpose in life? What are some of the factors that kind of encourage people to get a sense of identity and meaning and direction in life? Positive social support with the church. When the church encouraged them to be autonomous, think for themselves, that is what helped people to get a sense of direction, purpose, and meaning. When people had a positive sense of themselves, that is what helped them to grow in this purpose in life. On the other hand, a sense of confusion, alienation not just from the church, alienation from their families, alienation from their friends, not knowing where they are in life, sent the scores really down. And having a negative relationship with the church also was a negative factor in purpose in life. When we think of self-image, a small percentage, 15% have a good self-image. 1 in 5 have poor self-images. Self-image seems to improve with levels of education, and therefore the importance of education. Now, talking about education, a couple of years ago, we did a study on do our education institutions encourage critical thinking? Because we said we have so many problems going on in our country. We have so many educational institutions in our country, the church. What is happening? Ideally, we say our students should come out with a sense of value, a sense of being able to contribute positively to make a change in the country. But we did not find that. And one of the things is that we found that critical thinking, asking questions, is not really being encouraged. We are perhaps more focused on getting 100% pass rate in our schools. People who are employed have a high self-image. When you have a high self-image, it also connects to high purpose in life. What contributes to a high self-image? A relationship with friends and relationship with family. So this is where, when youth have people who can listen to them, people who can understand them, when they have that sense of belonging, they have a sense of worth. And this then gets translated into perhaps in their workplace, in all the different areas of life. People who have people who are unemployed have the lowest kind of self-image. Therefore, perhaps we can think of relationship with family and friends is something really important. Youth like to spend a lot of time talking. Now there's no talking, so people go onto their mobile phones and they're always on their phones. They need good human contact. Can we create spaces for that? Then we had the questions on relationship with the church. About 20% said that they had a high relationship with the church, but a good number had a low relationship with the church. Women seem to have a better relationship with the church than the girls seem to have a better relationship with the church than boys. Perhaps because girls tend to be much more oriented towards relationship, boys may be more critical. So that could be part of the equation. Now, scores on relationship with the church seem to decrease as people progress through education. So we find kind of low scores, the number of people with low scores scoring low on relationship with the church is increasing as people get more educated. And one possible explanation for that is that as people get more educated, they start asking questions. And maybe the church, the clergy, the church leadership does not have adequate answers. Very, very, very important. In the training here that we see, there is such a lot of emphasis on doctrine, but not so much emphasis on dealing with real life issues. And the ability to deal with real life issues is extremely important, in my opinion. Unemployed youth had the poorest relationship with the church. The relationship with the church kind of drops after the age of 20, when people can think for themselves, ask questions. And asking questions is really important, because that is how we grow. When we come later to some of the other responses, we'll see that the sense of inequality between clergy and the rest of the people in the church is a real problem for the youth. We see that there. Then, of course, relationship with the family. Quite a big number have high scores on relationship with families. So that is good, very good. However, there is still a big chunk of people, 20%, 1 in 5, have poor family relationships. Women seem to have better family relationships than boys. As education improves, scores on relationships with the family also seem to increase. Relationship with families are best among those who are employed. And kind of it makes sense that I will keep on good terms with somebody in my family who's earning well. Somebody who's not earning and just wasting his time, I'm not going to be so tolerant of that person. Okay? So this is something for us to think about. Perhaps the people who need our help the most are the people that the church and the families are pushing to one side or ignoring. These are perhaps, I think, the ones who need our attention more. Relationship with friends. Now, only about 20% had high scores on relationship with friends. And that could be because such a lot of emphasis is given on towards other things, social media. That's something for us to think about. We need to find ways in which we can get people to really bond with each other. One simple thing is when people spend too much time on their phones, they lose the ability to develop social skills, social interaction. So I know of a case of a guy who fell in love with somebody on social media, broke up with her on social media, wanted to commit suicide. All of this on social media. He had never met the person face to face. So we need to be able to find ways. And one of the really good ways is getting people involved in something that is larger than themselves. Youth need to have something that sets them on fire. Think of that Disha Ravi, who was arrested and all, because passionate about climate change. A couple of years ago, one before the pandemic started, we had students from Symbiosis come here, and they were involved in the CAA protests. You could see them on fire with something, really on fire. But in most of our churches, no interest in that. And that's a real concern, because that's one of the easiest ways to lose our youth. If the church only stays with religious stuff, it will soon be dead, my opinion. Social commitment. social commitment in the church among youth, if you look at that, kind of low. Low scorers make up almost 30%. And here we're just talking about not active involvement also. Are you concerned about things? Younger ones and older ones, postgraduate students, seem to have a higher sense of social issues, and the unemployed and those in the early teenage years, 16 to 20, are more affected about social issues. Now, this is a very critical time. The unemployed, because they're facing it firsthand, because social issues are hitting them. 16 to 20 is the time when people are asking questions. They're saying, this world, it's not going right. We need to have space for this. Very, 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 very important. If we don't bring up these issues, if we don't help provide the space for you to talk about these issues, we will lose them. Okay? Now, these are, like I told you, it was a pan-India study. And so these red blocks showed which states had a significant number of people who scored low. So if we see here, Kerala, self-image, perception about the church, relationship with family, social commitment and purpose in life, big chunk of people have low. So it doesn't give a very positive sense of where the church is today on all of these areas. We also asked the respondents, do you feel embarrassed by the church? And we look at the ones which are highlighted, 44% in Kerala, 30% in Tamil Nadu, almost 35% in Andhra, Telangana, 21%. So all of the southern part of India, where we have the bulk of the Catholics, a lot of people embarrassed by the church. What are they embarrassed about? Scandals, sexual and financial. Now, all of this happened way before what is happening now. Emphasis on money, conservative mindset of clergy, inequality between laity and clergy. These are things that are embarrassing our youth. And if the embarrassment goes more, people will just leave the church. When we look at this across the different states, overall in India, scandals were the biggest. Then money-mindedness and conservative clergy. This will not be surprising to many of you who are in touch with what is happening in the church. In Kerala, money-mindedness was the top, followed by scandals and inequality. In Tamil Nadu, it was scandals and money-mindedness and caste dynamics. If you look at caste dynamics, big chunk throughout, but especially in Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu. Okay. So this gives us a sense of like, we have to pay attention to this because we can lose our youth. Where youth are extremely sensitive to negative perceptions by others. And so therefore, if youth says, oh, what kind of a church? See what these priests of yours are doing? It creates a big sense of shame for them. And my guess is we will lose a lot of youth if we don't attend to this. We also asked youth, what do you think the church needs to focus on? And these are the three things they told us: spiritual growth, God experience, social work and charity, catechesis, growth, real growth, not just catechesis, but growing in adult faith. When we look at it across from the different states in the country, across India, 60% of the youth said spiritual growth, social work and catechesis are really important. I'm just going to let you take a glance at this for a moment. This was even more in Karnataka, in Maharashtra, Goa, and northeastern West Bengal. The darker orange colors are the highest. Also, does the church, do youth feel trusted by the church? Yeah, a lot of them said they do feel trusted by the church, but they also feel embarrassed by the church. Okay. The biggest problems in the church, you ask them, what is the biggest problems? And the ones that got the most are money-mindedness, scandals, and faith deterioration among ladies. So I don't think they could have spelled out the challenges more clearly for us. Their dream for the church was calling us to grow in faith, grow in a sense of unity, grow in witness and in social concern. Kind of this sounds like a lot what Pope Francis is calling us to do. They dream for themselves, being good people, education, career, success. And for this, I think two things are needed, at least. One, they need adequate role models. And the second is guidance and support in navigating life. Their greatest fears are not achieving their goals, the sense of being separated from God. Now, they too are going through this struggle because they see the church changing so rapidly. They see the world changing so rapidly, and they're caught between this world that is changing so rapidly and the church that is not keeping pace with this change. And they're struggling with that. They see the deterioration of society, social injustice, and need to change that. Okay, so this is where I'm going to end. There's a lot more that can be said. Just one thing here. 55% of the Catholic youth want the church to be actively involved in political issues. Now, they said this before the CAA, NRC, farmers agitation stand swung. I think the youth have the pulse of India much more than church leadership. So with that, I'm going to stop this and stop the sharing, and maybe we can have some time for questions. Okay, so over to you. I'm going to open it for questions, comments. Remember, I don't have all the answers. I have very few answers. These are just some of my opinions and some of the data. Yes, so please feel free to unmute and speak.
All right, Dinesh. Thank you, Dinesh.
Okay, Stephen, thank you.
Do you have any moderator for the session? No, you are moderating.
Oh, you are there. You're welcome.
I was waiting for any moderator to intervene. No problem. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for the presentation. Quite interesting. You mentioned about some theories in the beginning, then with the data, you substantiated your claim. It's really interesting to note with the more education and employment, they have a better vision and understanding themselves and others. It's quite revealing. And in the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that it's better the students join the religious life, congregations or dioceses, provinces quite late. These days, in many places, they insist upon at least the undergraduate degree before they join. But still, some places they take it much early. But my question is, even if they join a little early, as you point out, the long years of formation, at least 10 years or 8 years, or sometimes more, with all the philosophy, theology, psychology, are we not able to help them really to have a better understanding of themselves and worldview, etc.? What is your opinion on that?
Okay.
Thank you.
My opinion on that is going back to what Saint Ignatius tells us about discernment. He says whenever you're making discernment, you can discern between two options, but you can only discern when you are equally balanced towards both the possible options. So he gives the example of married life or religious life. Okay. Now, if I'm already tilted to one side, I don't have that inner freedom to make a choice. Now, our students have already made that choice. Now, in the middle of that choice, you're saying, okay, how can you discern? It just doesn't work. Okay. So when people come to final vows or people come before ordination, there is too much to lose by making a fresh choice. Okay. And because the church is so kind of going into panic mode that we are getting less and less vocations, therefore we are trying to grab vocations from everywhere. I think we are using a kind of wrong approach, perhaps. So that's one of the difficulties, I think.
Thank you, Dinesh. And as you said earlier times, the stigma was more. No, if someone joins, goes to seminary and novitiate, comes back, it will be like stigmatized in the society. But now that it's becoming less and less, and that is a good sign. Good. Thank you, Dinesh.
So Reena has her hand up.
Can you that principal? There's a lot of noise coming throughout the session from
principal, whoever principal is. As a matter of principle.
Before I ask you a question, I'd like to talk to Stephen Jayad also. When you say that they go through formation, they are in isolation from the world, and so they are very protected. So the changes that are taking place in the world, in the way families, the way family dynamics within families, the dynamics of relating to the changes, economic changes, political changes, they are somehow protected within the seminaries. And so the question is, how complete is their formation? Because then they're coming out with a very, they may know a lot of doctrine, but very low level of how to interact with people. And that is one thing. They don't know how to interact with women. That's one big thing that I've seen. It's a very condescending attitude. So anyway, that is to Stephen. But my question to you, Dinesh, finally, you know what I'm saying, a session which made sense and was relevant to today. In the beginning, you asked a question. By the way, thanks for the session. You asked a question in the beginning. Will you voluntarily hurt someone when authority asks you to do that?
Mm-hmm.
When the church, people like you, clergy, remain silent when abuse is taking place, are you not complicit by your silence in whether it is with the youth, they're damaging their faith, whether it is sexual abuse, whatever it is, when lay people or clergy don't take a stand, aren't we complicit in allowing authority to cause damage?
Yeah, I think you're asking a question which is perhaps echoing in all our hearts. To what extent are we complicit? And I think we are. We cannot pass the buck off and say, oh, this is the system, this is how the church functions. Sooner or later, we have to come and deal with it and face-to-face deal with it ourselves. I'm going to give you a kind of strange response. As part of my studies, I got fascinated in these near-death experiences. And so I was reading a lot about what people say about their near-death experiences. There are a lot of commonalities. But one of the things that they, practically all of them say, is that they have this review of life. And this is a review of life, but a reliving of every moment of your life. And everything that I have said or done or felt or thought, and how this has affected other people. And I experience it not just I doing it as them, but I experience it as them receiving it and how it ripples out. So we are responsible. We are part of this. We are complicit. I think we don't realize that all this stuff that we are doing, we are ultimately doing to ourselves also. Because as we have some wonderful people like Richard Rohr, who reminds us that we are always connected. We talk about ourselves as the body of Christ. What happens to one happens to all. All of us are both perpetrators. All of us are also victims. But that is something that we have to grow into, that sense of, the sense of the mystical, the sense of mystery, the sense of being part of a reality that is much, much more complex than we can comprehend.
Thanks.
Yes, Goretti. Good to see you. I hope you're not going to ask the question in Spanish or say it in Spanish, because I haven't yet learned. You're muted. You're still muted. You have to unmute.
Thank you. I was saying thanks to you for your very comprehensive talk, because it gave us also some theories which are there with regard to the identity of youth, as well as the development stages and our own formation. It made me also reflect on our own formation. No? And I see how important it is to be well formed. But it is such a difficult task, because people, who are having a lot of formation sometimes, like we people who are dedicated, or people who are having the possibilities to do, like, as Reena was saying also, a lot of full-time studies and so on and so forth with regard to philosophy and theology and psychology and all that. How to be able to help, families, because families, very often parents are unable to, the parenting it starts from a very young age, parenting, and this kind of formation has to be accessible to people who are really at the grassroots, I would say at the very early stages of the child, because so often the problems start from there. And then later on, the teachers also find it difficult to. So this is really something which I feel is, going to the root of the problem, is basically how to help our children, our youth, our young adults, and even ourselves to develop this sense of belonging, this sense of purpose in life, this sense of identity. But in the church, we have a lot of resources, but I feel sometimes that the resources are not being, fully utilized, or not reaching the people who really could use it. So can you just throw some light on how you see this?
Okay, part of the problem, I think, is that too much is done by celibate clergy. And we think that we have the answers to everything. It would be so much better if we had parents, married people who have the life experience. And I think the church also needs to invest in educating these people with higher degrees in this, so that they have the professional competence and they have the life experience, and they can make a huge change. Now, is the church to invest in that? I think that it's very important that we do it. Otherwise, I'm going to also give a disclaimer. we say that the church has a lot of, as part of formation, a lot of exposure to things like psychology and all. I'm not so sure. The church is right now kind of tending to, at least in India, give up on the social sciences, give up on say political understandings, social awareness, and becoming more cult oriented, ritual oriented. And that, I think, is a problem, because it takes us away from the real difficulties of life. Like recently, emphasis in the church about which direction the priest has to face. So things like that tell us kind of that we are kind of way off track, and we need to get much more involved.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Reena looks ready to fire off all cannons.
Actually, I suppose as a result of this group, whether there are people who are interested in meeting to reflect together or something like that, mixed group.
I think it's very important when people sit together and reflect together.
Yeah.
Because there is a group mind that emerges and a tremendous wisdom that comes in.
Yeah.
And we then kind of come to a critical mass that can make a change. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Patole, you'll have to unmute.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Father Dinesh.
Good evening.
First of all, I have to express my regret for not being able to attend right from the beginning. Somehow I got engrossed in some other work and forgot about it. And my wife reminded me that I have an engagement with you, with JD. So I came back immediately, but almost half an hour I missed. So anyway, whatever I heard, 2-3 things struck me. First thing is that the low image among the youth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that bothers me much, because more than 20% people per youth that you have studied have low image, and that is something dangerous for their own development, as also for the church, for building the church, local church, and also the overall church in the country. Another thing that struck me was the relationship of youth with the church. That is again low to a great degree. That is again quite worrisome. And your statement, which was very accurate, and it appealed to me, that in the seminaries, more emphasis is on the doctrine than on the leadership. I think that if I'm correct in grasping that, then I think that really is the crux of the problem, that leadership at the grassroots, at the parish level, among the clergy, has to improve a lot to motivate, to inspire our youth. First of all, giving self-examples, putting up self-example. More importantly, the styles of leadership, okay, the different types of leadership. For instance, we have a great example of Pope Francis. He's putting up, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So he is putting up a great example of himself as a servant leader. Okay, there are different types of leadership, but nowadays, largely only the authoritative leadership is being presented in most of the parishes, and that is not accepted. In fact, our priests are more concerned about their authority. They exercise more authority, and more importantly, what they speak, it is not really very much visible in what they do and how they put up as their behavior and things like that. So that really creates a distance between the church and the youth. Of course, the adults also are there, but the youth per se, they are definitely, there is a kind of continuous process of social auditing. We must accept this fact, and we must be really aware of this fact that the adults, the faithful, they do talk about the priests that they have. Okay, and there is a continuous process of social auditing, and more so among the youth, and therefore they have their own perception, and that perception matters a lot. It matters a lot for contributing to the church and being part of it, developing a sense of belongingness, as also vocations. In many ways, it is like that.
Yes.
So another thing is that I'm saying
thank
that,
you. Thank you. Dr. Patole, Mr. Francis also has a hand
Okay.
raised. Yeah. So
Okay,
thank you.
okay.
Thank you. I think very valuable insights. Thank you.
So much attention needs to be given to many
Yes,
things,
yes,
including
very much.
youth development. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
So, yes. Yes, Francis.
Yes, Father. Your session was very interesting, and some of your problems we in Malaysia also face the same youth problem. But what I feel now is, as what you say, if the church is little oriented towards justice and towards the government not being fair, youths are involved. Youths are involved when a little bit of politics is involved.
Yeah.
The older people are involved only in prayers, Legion of Mary, and they are not interested in politics. So it all depends on the individual priest who is posted to the parish.
Very much.
How much he is going to involve himself with the youths. If the priest is not interested in the youths, then the youths will go astray.
Right.
They are not going to come back to the church. And if the priest, whether he's 80 years old or whether he's 30 years old or whether he's 50 years old, is little oriented and do things in order to please the youths are very active in that church.
Right.
Thank you.
Very much. Yeah. One of the things that youth look forward to is having role models and having people like that who are really inspiring, concerned about justice, just brings the whole church alive. And of course, we need different kinds of people, because not everybody is the same kind. There's just, we need all different kinds of people. Yeah. Thank you for that. So we are almost at the end. There's just a couple of minutes more.
When are you starting the next series?
Our next series, we shall let you know. We still have to meet as a coordinating team and decide on themes.
Inshallah, you get some laity involved in.
Yes, very much. Very much. Thanks for that. And I know that you are ready and willing to help. I thought to end with one of the images that kind of Saint Ignatius gives us in the long retreat is Jesus, who is found at the temple. And I find that scene very, very beautiful, because you have Jesus, who's kind of a youth in a way, going and doing his own thing. And then his parents are searching for him. And finally, they find him there. And Mary says, "Hey, why have you done this to us?" If it had been a present-day parent, probably you would have, that young Jesus would have got 2 slaps and saying, "Where the heck did you go?" But Mary pondered all of that was happening. And so Mary is kind of going through a process of her own, and Jesus is going through a process of age and grace and wisdom. And so I thought perhaps we could ask Our Lady of the Way, to be with us just as she was with the early church, praying for us, guiding us, so that we too can grow with and guide and journey with our youth. And so I invite you to join me either in silence or aloud as we pray the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, without end. Amen. So thank you so much. And thank you for being part of this whole journey. And we hope to have more focused modules. Now, this was kind of like a basic introduction, looking at all different kinds of things. And some people are wondering, like, what the heck are we doing? Because they're looking for something more focused. And this is kind of what we will be moving into with people who are experts. I'm not a philosophy expert, that is Stephen. I'm not a theology expert, that's Francis Gonsalves. I will do my own stuff. Okay. And here's Linus.
Yes, before we conclude, just want to say on behalf of everybody, Father Dinesh, thanks, because every Saturday, making all the arrangements, sending out the messages, keeping the link and keeping track of everything. Great talk, and for all, for coordinating with everyone. Thank you very much. And God bless you, Father Dinesh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linus, I will come down and kneel before you and take the blessing in the refectory.
Sure. Please. Yeah.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you.
Thanks, Shitu, for being a silent support always there. Thank you.
See, you all people are you putting that light, yeah? Hostel near the gate, no?
Okay.
In the morning, you are putting.
I'm going to mute the principal.
Anywhere light.
All the secrets are coming out.
Okay. So thanks. Let me end the recording.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Father. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Okay. Thank you.